With all the talk about the Nikon ZRs and the Canon C50s and the Sony A7 IVs, Blackmagic be sitting in the corner like this, throwing up insane discounts on almost their entire lineup over Black Friday season. From Blackmagic pocket cameras to the Pyxis 6K and its monitor, everything, everywhere, all at once got heavily discounted. Now those deals may be over, but because Blackmagic's regular prices are pretty much the equivalent of their competitors' crazy discounts, for those considering a dip into the wonderful world of Blackmagic, it has never been a better time to become a practitioner of the dark arts.
I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can tell you how to bottle fame.
But which Blackmagic should you buy? A Pyxis or a Pocket? A Pocket or a Pyxis? Which one should you pick? And what about the new Pyxis 12K and even the Ursa Cine 12K LF? Is it worth upgrading and paying top dollar for their new top-of-the-line Cine cameras? Well, I am Blackmagic's premier fuckboy, and as such, I've just done some serious filming with the new 12K Cine and the 12K Pyxis. I own a 6K full frame, a 6K Pro, and a 6K G2, not to mention the 6K original. So as the Christmas season gets into full swing, I'm putting together this handy Blackmagic buyer's guide to help you decide once and for all which Blackmagic camera is right for you, and a comprehensive look at the new 12K cameras based around a music video shoot we recently completed with them. First, let's talk about the original Pocket 6K series with the 6K G2 and the 6K Pro. The 6K G2 is simply the original Pocket 6K with a much nicer updated tiltable screen and improved brightness, which I believe is, yes, most definitely worth it. And the difference between the G2 and the 6K Pro is the internal ND filters on the 6K Pro. As an owner of both of these, it really comes down to how much you value internal NDs. Yes, they are very handy. I know there's some criticism around their color shift, but I think it's worth the color shift to essentially stop using variable NDs on the front of all your lenses. And the great news is they both provide exactly the same image, so you can't really go wrong with either. They allow you to film in B-RAW or, and this is a great selling point, ProRes. Now, when using RAW, if you choose a resolution below 6K, you window in on the sensor, and that is not great. But when you film in ProRes, you can film in 4K DCI, UHD, and 1080 with no sensor crop. So you're getting an exceptional downsampled 6K image in a much smaller file size if you choose to film in HD. In ProRes LT mode, for example, a 512 gig card in this mode will give you 13 hours of footage versus only 2 hours of footage in B-RAW 6K at 12:1. Also, ProRes is an industry standard, which can make handing off footage to clients a very easy and straightforward process, something that Blackmagic forgot in their newer cameras. Both cameras can do 50 FPS at 6K without a crop, and can even do 120 frames per second in their cropped 2.8K mode. And they have all the same modes. There is no Canon cripple hammer here, so at this point you're paying essentially $600 more with the 6K Pro to get internal NDs. Is that worth it to you? For me, for the convenience, probably. But you know what's a lot cheaper? Putting on your big boy pants and getting an ND filter and a few step-up rings. I picked the 6K Pro for convenience over savings. Now, although these cameras are old by camera standards, they very much compete with all the newest cameras on the market. 6K B-RAW beats a lot of mirrorless cameras without breaking a sweat. I'm talking FX2s, FX3s, A7 IVs, and yeah, even Panasonic S1 IIs in my humble opinion. 6K is more than you need. Uncropped 50 FPS slow motion is great, and you cannot F with the Blackmagic color science. And well before the ZR was even a twinkle in Nikon's eye, these cameras are rocking a mighty 1500 nit 5-inch LCD back screen, perfect for avoiding the use of external monitors. The screen is made even better by Blackmagic's simple, highly intuitive menu system, which puts all other brands to shame. We also get really nice dual mini XLR ports with phantom power, a 3.5mm jack, The ports allow line level input, and these cameras have surprisingly good preamps. They also have a full-size HDMI and a USB-C port to record externally via SSD. There's an SD card slot and a CFast card slot as well, so you really can't complain when it comes to recording options. These do represent excellent value for money and do kind of earn their cinema name based off the image they produce, and will continue to do so for years to come. However, they're not perfect and do have a few drawbacks. First, they are EF mount, which means being limited to EF lenses without an easy adapter to switch to PL. I mean, personally, I think using EF lenses is great, but it's not really future-proofing your investment. The battery life is terrible, less than an hour and more like 40 minutes a lot of the time. There's Super 35 cameras with basically a 1.6 times crop, which is a little intense, and their rolling shutter performance is not very good at 20 milliseconds. Also, sadly, there is no OLPF filters in these cameras, although you can install them independently, which is what I ultimately did. And while the LCD screen is great, this is a clunky camera to try and rig up. The oversized DSLR feel is not super fun to operate in the field. They also don't do any type of continuous autofocus, but until very recently, no Blackmagic camera did. All in all, great cameras in 2026 and beyond. But to get the most out of these cameras, you will need to learn just a little bit of color grading in DaVinci Resolve, and that's where the sponsor of this video, Skillshare, can help. Skillshare is a platform for learning with classes designed to help you upskill in almost any area. Want to improve your content on YouTube? Try MKBHD's breakdown on how to script, shoot, and edit videos. In fact, I was already a Skillshare member before the team even reached out to me to collaborate, and I have used their classes specifically for my work here on YouTube. As Premiere Pro keeps getting more expensive, making the switch to DaVinci Resolve makes more and more sense, but it can feel intimidating to relearn an entirely new editing software. Fortunately, Artie Singh's DaVinci Resolve Masterclass provides you a step-by-step guide to mastering both the basics and more advanced features of Resolve and easy-to-digest chunks, bringing you up to speed in only a few hours. Artie Singh also has a cinematic color grading class for more advanced users, which I'm currently doing to help improve my color grading skills, which have always been one of my personal weaknesses. But Skillshare is not just a great gift for yourself, but also for the loved ones in your life. Give the gift of, I've always wanted to learn that. Skillshare is an awesome gift for you and a thoughtful one for your friends and family. Sign up today and grab a few gift cards while you're there. The first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Plus, you can give Skillshare memberships to your friends and family. So get started today. Now you know how to grade that gorgeous B-raw footage. We move up to the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K full frame, which in a crazy plot twist is currently almost exactly the same price as the 6K Pro. Why would you upgrade to the full frame? Well, it's in the name.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
This was the first full frame 6K camera from Blackmagic, and my sweet goodness, is it a lovely image. I started my last international documentary with the 6K Pro as my A cam and the G2 as my B cam, but quickly started using the 6K full frame as my A cam when it was released about a quarter of the way through filming. This image is gorgeous, and while it does match exceptionally well with the other pocket cameras, there is just a little bit of extra magic that comes from the sensor. It does look quite special. That's not a scientific measurement of improvement, it's just straight up full frame vibes. Now I'll be honest, when they announced this camera, I was disappointed. I may have even made a video about it. The same damn chunky oversized DSLR body. Had we learned nothing? But as Blackmagic's premier fuckboy, I still had to hate purchase it.
You want this, don't you? The heat is swelling in you now.
And quickly, the hate turned to love as I slowly fell head over heels for that full frame image. It also allows you to record in open gate, which is great according to every shield tuber currently glazing Canon and Panasonic's new releases. I like it for its ability to be used with anamorphic lenses, something the older pocket cameras really couldn't do justice to thanks to their crop. It is a very welcome addition, as is a newly minted OLPF filter on these cameras. Also, this camera can be purchased in EF, PL or L mount, and choosing L mount means it's easier to adapt lenses, including EF lenses, but mainly PL, to it quickly and easily. The mount is newer, and new lenses are being offered in L mount courtesy of the L mount Alliance, whereas EF has reached the end of its life cycle. But while the new full frame is great, full frame came at a price, because we lost ProRes as a shooting option, which, as I dedicated a whole video to, there is no way not to see as an L for these L mount Blackmagics. We also don't get open gate slow motion past 36 frames per second, and curiously and frustratingly, there is still no 16:9 mode in this camera. You get open gate and you get 6K 17:9, but we desperately need a regular 16:9 mode in this camera so we can easily match it to all the other Blackmagic pocket cameras, which do have this option. And yes, there are no ND filters internally, but all the rest of the ports and functionality remain relatively the same, except this camera features a CFast Type B slot to accommodate that full frame 6K recording. No SD cards anymore, but you can still record externally via USB-C. Now, for the graduation to full frame alone, I think this camera is well worth it. But then came the curveball of all curveballs. One nondescript day in April, Grant Petty decided to go on an absolute tear.
So that'd be pretty cool.
Petty was wildin' because Blackmagic announced a firmware update to the 6K full frame, which just introduced phase detect autofocus. You never thought you'd see it, but this was a big deal. While this was advertised as a beta version, we've yet to see another official update. You can find a newer beta version floating around the dark web, and by dark web I mean Blackmagic forums. I found in certain situations autofocus was quite usable, and the potential it represented was nothing short of, yes, say it with me now kids, a game changer. Blackmagic B-RAW 6K full frame with autofocus. This is next level. As of this video, this camera is the only Blackmagic camera to feature this new phase detect autofocus. I imagine it's going to come to some of the Pyxis models in the future, but it's already been 8 months and nothing so far, so the real winners are anybody who didn't sell their 6K full frame cinema cameras to get a Pyxis 6K, which we will talk about next. But considering the 6K full frame offers a better mount, an OLPF, open gate, and autofocus, plus full frame itself, and is currently priced the same as a Pocket 6K Pro, then I think it's a no-brainer to get this camera. This is my pick of the pocket-shaped cameras, unless you really need ND filters or you really need long recording times and a proper HD mode. But now, how does the 6K full frame compare to the Pyxis 6K? That is a complicated question because in many ways, they are in fact the same camera. In mid-2024, we finally got the thing we'd been asking Blackmagic for years. The Pyxis 6K was a box camera, a cube, a cine-shaped cine camera that didn't look like an oversized football or a roided up mirrorless camera. And once again, I'll be the first to say I was very critical of the Pyxis. I may have even made a video about it. And the main reason for that was simple. This was just a Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K full frame in a different body for about $500 more. Just like the Pocket 6K line of cameras, there really isn't a difference in image quality. So that felt like a lot of extra money to pay for a cube-shaped camera you might already own in a different shape, especially because it does feel that they did take a few shortcuts in this design. I wasn't convinced they stuck the landing. While similar, there are some distinct and important differences between the Pyxis 6K and the 6K full frame. The Pyxis has timecode in and SDI out along with an Ethernet port and 2 CF Express Type B slots, which you cannot record to simultaneously, thus making the idea of this dual card slot thing completely redundant. You do lose an HDMI out port, which is a real shame, but you get an extra USB-C port for connecting the Blackmagic monitor. For every one thing you gain on the Pyxis, you seem to lose something else. You have a 3.5mm jack for audio, but now only one mini XLR port with phantom power. And the battery now runs on Sony BPU batteries, which is an improvement from MPF batteries, but still not as good as a V-mount option would have been. But one of the less good additions is moving the LCD screen to the side of the camera, which is fine if the camera is head height with you or a focus puller, but otherwise a pain to deal with. And the main way to control the camera, it just doesn't really make logical sense. It also doesn't seem to be as high quality as the monitors from the old Blackmagic Pockets, which means that the first and most essential add-on to this camera is the Blackmagic monitor, which is essentially like the back LCD screens made on the Pocket cameras. This does fix the main problem with the Pyxis: touch controls, plugs discreetly into the front USB-C at 1500 nits, and while it's very affordable, that is still an additional cost of $325 to your new camera package. The Pyxis is obviously designed for true cinematographers, not your garden variety videographers, with ports and a layout which directly reflects that. Overall, this change is very welcome. It's just perhaps not quite as well thought out as you might have hoped. The Pyxis 6K does offer additional anamorphic D-squeeze modes in the camera, and very crucially a 16:9 mode that is still missing from the 6K full frame. What it doesn't have is that very exciting new autofocus 6K full frame feature. Is it worth upgrading, knowing that potentially autofocus is probably, maybe, hopefully, one day soon coming to the Pyxis as well? How much do you like cubes? How much are you prepared to spend on additional accessories such as this tilter V-mount build and the Blackmagic monitor itself? I think the upgrade makes sense if you value the cube shape, want to utilize the Ethernet port for streaming and studio work, or need SDI out and timecode. And man, is that 16:9 mode useful. If you don't have those requirements and you're happy to battle with the big blocky DSLR style body of the cinema camera 6K full frame, then like me, you might be better off sticking with that, like I did. But Blackmagic, may we please have a 16:9 and anamorphic update for that camera? Now let's look at the Blackmagic Pyxis 12K and Ursa 12K LF. Much like World Championship Wrestling in the late 90s, this is
Where the big boys play.
I had the opportunity to shoot an upcoming music video on the LF, and my DOP partner in crime, ISAZH Newcomb, has recently swapped his red Gemini for the Pyxis 12K, and so I got to run a bunch of tests comparing it to my cinema camera 6K. I also used my 6K as B cam on the music video for some more side-by-side comparisons. First, let's look at the Ursa 12K LF. LF stands for large format, but it should stand for large effin' footprint, because this thing is huge. For every single company calling their tiny mirrorless cameras cinema cameras, this is an actual cinema camera.
He's got a knife.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
And as such, there are certain things it does very well. You have all the I/O ports you could possibly want. You have this fantastic flip out screen, but it really is a camera designed to be operated by more than one person. It is heavy, like all true cinema cameras tend to be. You get internal ND filters once again. You get a lot more buttons on it for tactile control to complement the touchscreen LCD menu. You get full-size XLRs. Not only do you get your flip-out LCD screen, you also get another massive screen on the other side of the camera for your focus puller. And yes, this is definitely a higher quality one than the ones found on the Pyxis. It's got 10G Ethernet, two 12G SDI ports, and timecode in. This is a true sequel to the Ursa Mini Pro line of cameras. They could have called it the Ursa Maxi Super Pro and be done with it. And this does feel like they've spent some money improving the build and components of this compared to the old Ursa Mini Pro bodies of the 4.6 and 12K. As a cinema camera, it doesn't have too many downsides, although it does use B-mount batteries, which are very expensive and not as common for most users as V-mounts might be. This thing does suck some serious power running everything through this beast. It also has a media module instead of traditional cards to store footage, a bit of a curiosity, which for me became quite the headache as I could only transfer from it via the Ethernet cable, which definitely was a lot harder than you'd think. You need a media module dock if you don't transfer straight from the camera itself. That dock is $2,375. That's a pretty expensive addition for an already pricey by Blackmagic standards camera. Thankfully, they released a version that runs off CF Express Type B cards, and you can swap out that module should you want to go a more conventional route. As the name suggests, it is a resolution monster, but also more specifically a bit of a slow motion monster. You can record 100 frames per second in 12K or 120 frames per second in 12K 241. Go down to 8K and you can film in 144 frames per second. It can go even higher and lower resolutions. It has great rolling shutter, amazing dynamic range, and is really just a great all-round legitimate cinema camera. What you lose is portability. There won't be much running and gunning with this camera. Probably no fast walking even. In fact, there won't be too much handheld filming with this camera without some serious accessories to help support it. An easy rig would be mandatory. And no, this is not going to be on any kind of regular prosumer gimbal, which is why everyone got so excited when Blackmagic announced the Pyxis 12K, which essentially is the exact same body as the Pyxis 6K, but takes the guts of the Ursa 12K LF and somehow crams them into this tiny cube. Now you get the best of both worlds, and unless you are desperate for slow motion or the best rolling shutter performance, then it's hard not to recommend the Pyxis 12K over the Ursa 12K LF, because you get essentially the same quality image but in a very portable body that can indeed be operated by one person with only a very few small trade-offs. Apart from losing some of the nice ports from the Ursa and the internal ND filters and that flip-out LCD screen, the other compromises are mainly to do with rolling shutter and some of those slow motion frame rates which are so plentiful in the Ursa, which have been scaled right back here. It can only do 40 frames per second in full 12K mode and 112 frames per second in lightly cropped 8K modes. And I will say this, and I don't really have verifiable evidence, but I do think, at least to my eye, the Ursa 12K LF does actually produce a slightly better image than the Pyxis 12K. I mean, they say it's pretty much the same, but for me it felt like there was just a little more juice.
The juice is loose.
That is purely savage filmmaking conjecture, but that's how I felt. The basic no accessories version of the Ursa comes in at $7,700 for the body only, or $10,445 for the camera with all the add-ons and media module. The Pyxis 12K is $5,500, so there is also a matter of at least $2,200 you save by going with the Pyxis 12K. And fair play to Blackmagic for essentially cannibalizing their own sales of the Ursa 12K LF to give us the Pyxis 12K. If you don't need the extra ports and features in that full-on pro-style cinema body, and you don't need to shoot in crazy high-resolution frame rates, then the Pyxis version is a no-brainer. So that then leaves one final question. Do you really need a Pyxis 12K? Is it really that much better than the Pyxis 6K version? And if the Pyxis 6K is barely different to the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K full frame, then should you just pick that? What does the 12K give you that the 6K doesn't? Well, the short answer to that question is dynamic range. A claimed 16 stops of dynamic range, which many DOPs have applauded as the closest thing to ARRI that's not an ARRI. And yes, after filming with both, you could quite easily see that additional dynamic range at play with the 12K version. There's nothing wrong with the Pyxis 6K's dynamic range either, but with the 12K you definitely find yourself seeing more and it handling the juxtaposition of light and dark in an image more easily than really any other camera that I've personally had the opportunity to work with. And while the Pyxis 12K's higher frame rate options don't match the Ursa's, they are significantly better at all frame rates than the 6K, with some proper slow motion modes in 8K and 4K that the Pyxis 6K just doesn't have. Do you really need 12K? And what really is the difference between 12K and 6K? Does this double up in resolution make the 12K twice as good? Well, obviously it doesn't really work like that, and in a normal 4K timeline, while you will notice differences in dynamic range in certain situations, a lot of the time the image looks really close. Of course, you don't need 12K, but it's important not to fear 12K, my son, because He is merciful. Come into the light, child, and let Blackmagic fully resolve yourself of your low-res sins. Because one of the best aspects of these cameras is the fact that you can scale down to 8K or 4K and there is no crop in on your frame. It remains exactly the same dimensions, so because you're not losing anything frame size wise when using lower resolutions, I would ironically recommend pretty much never using 12K on this 12K camera. Just use 4K for most projects and 8K when you want a little bump in quality. Remember, this is B-RAW, baby.
Ooh, baby, I like it raw.
And at some of these compression ratios and resolutions, you're actually going to get more footage per gigabyte than you will using other mirrorless cameras shooting in their RAW modes. This is the beauty of B-RAW, so don't get hung up on that 12K naming convention. At the end of the day, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. The truth is the Pyxis 12K is also a great 8K camera and also a great 4K camera. So just look at it from that perspective. And yes, if you have a pretty fast SSD, you can play all these resolutions back in real time in your timeline without exploding your computer. Well, I could at least when editing them all on an M1 Max with 64 gig of RAM in an HD timeline. What the 12K sensor gives you is actually the ability to shoot in multiple different resolutions. It's giving you ultimate flexibility in all areas of image capture. Some have suggested, and I agree, that Blackmagic should have just found a different naming convention which didn't highlight the whole 12K thing. What they thought was a major selling point has been a bit of a cringe highlight that has probably just put more people off looking at the cameras than it has turned people onto them. It also should be noted that the 12K is definitely significantly better in low light than the 6K. It's not a Sony FX3, but I would notice when using my 6K as a B cam, I need to bump up that camera to the second base ISO and open the lens right up, while the 12K was still at its normal base ISO and at least one stop darker, but looked the same. In fact, our whole intention was to really push the image of the 12K in darkness for the shoot to see if it would hold up, and it absolutely did. And when you're scaling an 8K image down into 6K or 4K timelines, you are essentially amplifying that effect. The noise looks great. My cinematographer often references the plasticky skin of the other Blackmagic cameras, but that this look is absent from the 12K. My own palette is not really refined enough to notice the difference, but they both look great. I also want to point out that Blackmagic is the first camera company to really master soft, sharp images. That may sound like an oxymoron, or I may indeed just sound like a moron. But what I mean is that at the 12K's highest resolutions, the camera, while indeed super sharp, does not feel digital sharp. It does not feel over sharpened. And the pleasing soft roll-off maintains itself in a way that a lot of the other big companies are really struggling and failing to deliver. It's sharp, it's not ugly sharp. It's sharp, but not over sharp. It just feels like a cinema image as opposed to all these mirrorless cameras claiming cinema but looking iPhone. Lumix. For me, the Pyxis 12K is the ultimate traditional indie shooter camera. I've already talked about how much I like the Nikon ZR for indie filmmakers, but if you want to get out of that mirrorless camera design into an actual true traditional cinema body, the Pyxis 12K is it. Something that can be operated by one person or by a whole team. Something that delivers a high-end look, but also a great budget look if you can't afford the high-end gear and crew to push it. A videographer could buy this. A renowned cinematographer could buy this. It would work to shoot a film on, whether that be a narrative film or a documentary. It would make corporate work look fantastic if you're happy to manual focus, and you don't need it fixed on a gimbal. It should be noted that there has been some issues with the Pyxis 12K reported in the forums. Weird noise patterns, ghost recording, cameras not stopping recording, basically some quality control issues that haven't been ironed out yet. I didn't experience anything like that, but we were mainly using the Ursa LF version on this big shoot. Still, quirks aside, Overall, there's kind of nothing the Pyxis 12K can't do, and no environment where it can't offer something really special. At this price, it really is incredible value. It is perhaps the most scalable cinema camera, which makes it great for filmmakers who can grow into the Pyxis 12K as their work and hopefully budgets continue to improve. There's not really a ceiling to this camera. The sky is the limit, which is why it might surprise you to hear me say for most people, they probably should just get the Pyxis 6K. Not because the 12K isn't great, but because the 6K is also great and gets you close enough most of the time. That extra dynamic range is fantastic if you're a seasoned pro who's looking to create elaborate lighting setups that push boundaries and experiment with contrast and hard light. But honestly, dude, does that really sound like you? Out here with your DJI mic minis doing silly twirls with your RS4 gimbal, rocking ugly autofocus lenses and teal and oranging the shit out of your wimpy S-Log 3 image in basic bitch Premiere Pro? Dog, the Pyxis 6K is probably plenty enough cinema camera for you to try and wrap your tiny videographer brain around. And I say that respectfully as someone who makes most of his bread and butter as a tiny-brained videographer. The main reasons for getting the Pyxis 12K is if you plan on really leveraging that crazy dynamic range, or if you film high action content that requires better rolling shutter performance, which is definitely one of the shortcomings of the Pyxis 6K, or you really need some of its higher frame rates, or you need to jump seamlessly between high resolution without cropping into frame. If none of those advantages really sound like you, then the Pyxis 6K is going to be more than enough for most shooters in most scenarios. But all that being said, until the Pyxis 6K gets autofocus, I still can't help but feel that the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K full frame might be the real winner here. You get almost all the same features as the Pyxis, it's cheaper, and you won't have to buy the same amount of accessories to get it up and running. You can rig it out, as I often do, but you don't have to, whereas the Pyxis 6K leaves you no choice but to accessorize. So if you can put up with the awkward shape and that mediocre battery life, grabbing a 6K full frame on the used market right now feels like it's going to be a real steal. Or grabbing one when Blackmagic throws another crazy special. But if and when the Pyxis gets its autofocus update, I may have to finally bite the bullet and go full cubist. If you found this video helpful, use my affiliate links, sign up with Skillshare for Christmas, drop a kind comment that warms my heart, or tell me about which Blackmagic camera you're rocking or you intend to buy and why. As always, I am the Blackmagic wielding, tiny-brained corporate videographer, and I'll see you when I see you.